Can we just look at this? 60 Minutes, Call Her Daddy podcast, Howard Stern, late night shows, The View. I interviewed VP Harris for 25 minutes a week and a half ago on the economy. Her campaign promised that she would be getting out. Here she is. What's the strategy?
Well, look, I think they feel like they have to mix it up a little bit, right? The rally stage, the summer of joy has kind of worked itself through. It's gotten as far as it can get. They need to mix it up again to try to see if they can't earn some more votes, right? And one way you do it is by, making the story fresh. They need to have fresh stories by doing interviews, by having conversations, by attracting voters who may only be turning in now to pay attention to the campaign. So I think that they've got a few weeks left. They've got 29 days to make the difference with these handful of people, really very small number of people they've got left. Interviews are one way to do it. Now, many of them are not as tough as you are. A lot of them are going to be, friendly interviewers. But a few like 60 Minutes and are legitimate journalists like MSNBC, like you, and like other interviewers she's going to have. She's mixing it up between those and the ones where she feels like she can have a little bit of, interactions with, right? That'll be more friendly and perhaps fun for the audience. But she has to answer tough questions. And I think that she wants to show she's not afraid of tough questions. And that's why she's doing some of these.
Let's just stick with that, Susan, because she was criticized for not doing interviews. Now she's criticized that the interviews are too friendly. The goalpost keeps moving for her. Are they going to stop? Is there something she could do to make them stop? Or is it really they're just goading her to do more and more, hoping more exposure will mean she'll slip up and have make a mistake?
Well, look, 29 days out of a too close to call election, of course, the other side is rooting for her to make a mistake and to screw up. But I'm struck by the fact, Stephanie, that there's no obvious kind of what the campaigns are calling tentpole moment left in this campaign, right? So one of the reasons that Harris has to go out and do all these interviews is because there is no more debates. Donald Trump has not accepted, she has accepted the proposal to do a third presidential debate this year, the second between the two of them. Trump is refusing to do that. After the vice presidential debate last week, there's no other obvious moment of sort of convening a massive audience. Their hope was that 60 Minutes as a very highly rated, if not the most highly rated news program, would be the opportunity to do that. Donald Trump backed out of his own 60 Minutes interview. So if you're looking for a contrast, obviously that's a pretty sharp contrast that Harris was willing to sit down with 60 Minutes and Donald Trump was not. They did have, by the way, a blistering introduction in which they pointed that fact out, and that Donald Trump not only refused to do the interview, but was lying to 60 Minutes itself about what he claimed they had done to him in their 2016 interview. A vintage moment, really.
60 Minutes brought the receipts. Let's talk about the comparison, Mark, because Trump canceled on 60 Minutes. He's refused to do another debate. I have asked him every single day since I sat down with VP Harris. I have asked the Trump campaign, would he sit down? Same rules, one topic, the economy. Let's do this. And he's not doing any of those things. He's going on Fox News and ultra-friendly podcasts to promote his campaign and his businesses. So Republicans, are they really in a position to criticize here?
No, of course not. And I think what this underscores is that Donald Trump is running a base campaign. I mean, base, I guess, has sort of a double meaning here, but base in terms of going after the supporters who have been with him for a long time. It doesn't look like he has a lot of room to grow or even cares that much. I mean, Kamala Harris, as the relatively new candidate in this race, or as the new candidate in this race, does have room to grow. And I do think, to Susan's point earlier, the work that 60 Minutes did really at the top, to me, I thought the takeaway moment from the 60 Minutes interview was the anchor at first. I guess it was Scott Pelley, not just sort of doing away with the cursory. We asked the Trump campaign to appear and then they said no, but they actually, like you said, they brought, they went the full 9 yards. It took a couple minutes, talked about the lies, sort of called Trump out, and it really did, I think, paint a very, very pointed picture, especially in contrast between the two candidates, but also when you consider the debate dynamic at this point. And, unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to be on the same stage again.
Peter, can we go back to this idea that she's being criticized, that she's only doing friendly interviews and people are on the attack going after Donald Trump? Isn't the difference that Donald Trump is giving journalists lie after lie after lie that we are in a position to fact check every single day. You can ask Kamala Harris a question and not like her answer and feel like she's speaking in platitudes and you're not up for that policy. But it's not about whether or not you like her policy. When it comes to Donald Trump, he's lying. Your reporting today talks about the clear decline he's in. The difference is he shows as a candidate today versus than even a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's really striking when they say that she's not willing to take questions, and they take questions and say, well, you're not allowed to fact check me. You know, I'm allowed to say anything I want, no matter how true it is or not true, and you're not allowed to point out any contrary information or facts. You know, you're right about that. I mean, I think that he is mainly stuck to friendly interviews, of course, himself. Conservative media, friendly media, not just friendly media, people who are openly on his side, who are participating in the campaign in some way or another. And I think that that's, of course, a contrast. But you're right to say that he, you know, is called out on telling things that are not true, that are lies, that are false information, and doesn't seem to actually be moving the needle. We did a fact check on him a couple of weeks back where we looked at a typical Trump rally. And we looked at a typical Harris rally. And we said, okay, what of the statements that were made in these two rallies could be called false or misleading? And his number was something like 63 in a single rally, and hers was like 6, so 10 times as much. So obviously you don't want to call it false equivalence. It's not that she doesn't say things, as any politician does, that aren't true or that are misleading, but the proportion here is obviously very striking. And it is, I think, something we see more and more. We could talk about the story about his age if you want, but I mean, clearly, if you go back and watch his videos and you do any kind of analysis of how things have changed over the years, he is increasingly willing to say things that are not just untrue, but are so detached from reality, like the cats and dogs being eaten, and yet it doesn't seem to be rebounding against him.
It's not our job to call out whether we like her policies or her answers. It's our job to call out lies. And you said it right there. What was it, 60 to 6? There's a difference. I also want to play just some of the lies that he spread just this weekend. Watch this.
Over the past 8 years, those who want to stop us from achieving this future have slandered me, impeached me, indicted me, tried to throw me off the ballot, and who knows, maybe even tried to kill me. They're going to cheat. They cheat. That's all they want to do is cheat. And when you see this, it's the only way they're going to win. And we can't let that happen, and we can't let it happen again.
Susan, it was Peter's words that he said much of what he's saying is increasingly angry and rambling. Donald Trump's age was never really called into question when he was running against Joe Biden. Certainly Joe Biden's was. Will it be more in focus now that he's running against Kamala Harris? That's not the Donald Trump we saw a couple of years ago.
No, I mean, let's be clear, first of all, that Trump, if he were elected, would be the oldest man ever to serve as president if he served the next 4 years, oldest ever to be elected as president, and take it well into his 80s at a moment in time when you can chart, as Peter has done in his reporting, as others have done, the very clear downward trajectory of Trump. This is very noticeable. Go back and look at him campaigning in 2016, and you will see a different person. One number that really stuck out to me in Peter's story was that the average length of time in a Trump rally has nearly doubled. It's over 80 minutes now. He's talking and talking and talking to the point of, does it seem like he's randomly rambling on? Yes, the answer is yes. This is in every possible way a man unwilling to relinquish the stage, literally relinquish the stage in his rallies, and of course, metaphorically as well.